Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. This is LJ from the Arthurian Legend podcast of Swords and Magic, and I figured we could all use a little escape into the world of Arthurian legend this Christmas, if only for a moment. So, what better way to do that than with a short little reading of Part 1 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It is a wonderfully epic Christmas/New Year's holiday poem, and King Arthur loved nothing more than a story at Christmas time. So today we will honor that. This is the translation by Simon Armitage. It is my favorite translation. It is many people's favorite translation. So we will have fun. So, without further ado, go ahead and get relaxed, get cozy, grab a blanket, a hot cup of hot cocoa, maybe a glass of mead or spiced holiday wine, and your axe, because it does get quite dark and very spooky. So let's get ready and relax. And we will delve into the world of Simon Armitage's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Part 1. Once the siege and assault of Troy had ceased, with the city a smoke heap of cinders and ash. The traitor who contrived such betrayal there was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. So Aeneas it was, with his noble warriors, went conquering abroad, laying claim to the crowns of the wealthiest kingdoms in the western world. Mighty Romulus quickly careered towards Rome, and conceived a city in magnificent style, which from then until now has been known by his name. Titius constructed townships in Tuscany, and Langobard did likewise, building homes in Lombardy. And further afield, over the Sea of France, on broad hilltops, Felix Brutus made his stand. And wonder, dread, and war have lingered in that land, where loss and love in turn have held the upper hand. After Britain was built by this founding father, a bold race bred there, battle-happy men, causing trouble and torment in turbulent times. And through history, more strangeness has happened here than anywhere else I know of on earth. But most regal of rulers in the royal line was Arthur, who I heard is honored above all, and the inspiring story I intend to spin has moved the hearts and minds of many, an awesome episode in the legends of Arthur. So listen a little while to my tale, if you will, and I'll tell it as it's told in the town where it trips from the tongue, and as it has been inked in stories bold and strong, through letters which once linked have lasted loud and long. It was Christmas at Camelot, King Arthur's court, where the great and the good of the land had gathered, all the righteous lords of the ranks of the Round Table, quite properly carousing and reveling in pleasure. Time after time, in tournaments of joust, they had lunged at each other with levelled lances, then returned to the castle to carry on their caroling, for the feasting lasted a full fortnight and one day, with more food and drink than a fellow could dream of. The hubbub of their humor was heavenly to hear, pleasant dialogue by day, and dancing after dusk, so the house and its hall were lit with happiness, and lords and ladies were luminous with joy. Such a coming together of the gracious and the glad, the most chivalrous and courteous knights known to Christendom, the most wonderful women to have walked in this world, the handsomest king to be crowned at court. Fine folk with their futures before them there in that hall. Their highly honored king was happiest of all. No nobler knights had come within a castle's wall. With New Year so young, it still yawned and stretched. Helpings were doubled on the day that day. And as king and company were coming to the hall, the choir in the chapel fell suddenly quiet. Then a chorus erupted from the courtiers and clerks. "Noel!" they cheered. Then, "Noel! Noel! New Year gifts!" The knights cried next as they pressed forwards to offer their presents, teasing with frivolous favors and forfeits, till those ladies who lost couldn't help but laugh, and the undefeated were far from forlorn. Their merrymaking rolled on in this manner until mealtime, when, washed and worthy, they went to the table and were seated in order of honor, as was apt, with Guinevere in their gathering, gloriously framed at her place on the platform, pricelessly curtained by silk to each side, and canopied across with French weave and fine tapestry from the far east, studded with stones and stunning gems. Pearls beyond pocket, pearls beyond purchase or price. But not one stone outshone the quartz of the queen's eyes. With hand on heart, no one could argue otherwise. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. He brimmed with ebullience, being almost boyish in his love of life, and what he liked the least was to sit still watching the seasons slip by. His blood was busy, and he buzzed with thoughts, and the manner which played on his mind at the moment was his pledge to take no portion from his plate on such a special day until a story was told. Some far-fetched yarn or outrageous fable, the tallest of tales, yet one ringing with truth, like the action-packed epics of men-at-arms, or till some chancer had challenged his chosen knight, dared him with a lance to lay life on the line, to stare death face to face and accept defeat, should fortune or fate smile more favorably on his foe. Within Camelot's castle, this was the custom, and at feasts and festivals, when the fellowship would meet. With features proud and fine, he stood there tall and straight, a king at Christmas time, amid great merriment. And still he stands there just being himself, chatting away charmingly, exchanging views. Good Sir Gawain is seated by Guinevere, and at Arthur's other side sits Agravain the Hard Hand, both nephews of the king, and notable knights. At the head sat Bishop Baldwin as Arthur's guest of honor, with Ewain, son of Urien, to eat beside him. And as soon as the nobles had sampled the spread, the stalwarts on the benches to both sides were served. The first course comes into the fanfare and clamor of blasting trumpets hung with trembling banners, then pounding double drums and dining pipes, weird sounds and wails of such warbled wildness that to hear and feel them made the heart float free. Flavorsome delicacies of flesh were fetched in, and the freshest of foods, so many in fact there was scarcely space to present the stews, or to set the soups in the silver bowls on the cloth. Each guest received his share of bread or meat or broth, a dozen plates per pair, plus beer or wine, or both. Now, on the subject of supper, I'll say no more, as it's obvious to everyone that no one went without. Because another sound, a new sound, suddenly drew near, which might signal the king to sample his supper, for barely had the horns finished blowing their breath, and with the starters just spooned to the seated guests, a fearful form appeared, framed in the door. A mountain of a man, immeasurably high, a hulk of a human from head to hips, so long and thick in his loins and his limbs, I should genuinely judge him to be a half-giant, or a most massive man, the mightiest of mortals. But handsome, too, like any horseman worth his horse, for despite the bulk and brawn of his body, his stomach and waist were slender and sleek. In fact, in all features, he was finely formed, it seemed. Amazement seized their minds. No soul had ever seen a knight of such a kind, entirely emerald green. And his gear and garments were green as well. A tight-fitting tunic tailored to his torso, and a cloak to cover him, the cloth fully lined with smoothly shorn fur, clearly showing, and faced with all white ermine, as was the hood, worn shawled on his shoulders, shucked from his head. On his lower limbs, his leggings were also green, wrapped closely round his calves, and his sparkling spurs were green gold, strapped with stripy silk, and were set on his stockings, for this stranger was shoeless. In all vestments he revealed himself veritably verdant. From his belt hooks and buckle to the baubles and gems arrayed so richly around his costume, and adorning the saddle, stitched into silk. All the details of his dress are difficult to describe, embroidered as it was with butterflies and birds. Green beads emblazoned on a background of gold. All the horse's tack, harness strap, hind strap, the eye of the bit, each alloy and enamel, and the stirrups he stood in were similarly tinted, and the same with the cantle and the skirts of the saddle, all glimmering and glinting with the greenest jewels. And the horse, every hair was green, from hoof to mane. A steed of pure green stock. Each snort and shudder strained the hand-stitched bridle, but his rider had him reined. The fellow in green was in fine fettle. The hair of his head was as green as his horse, fine flowing locks which fanned across his back, plus a bushy green beard growing down to his breast, and his face hair, along with the hair of his head, was lopped in a line at elbow length, so half his arms were gowned in green growth, crimped at the collar like a king's cape. The mane of his mount was groomed to match, combed and knotted into curlicues, then tinseled with gold, tied and twisted green over gold, green over gold. The fetlocks were finished in the same fashion, with bright green ribbon braided with beads, as was the tail to its tippity-tip. And a long tied thong, lacing it tight, was strung with gold bells which resounded and shone. No waking man had witnessed such a warrior, or weird warhorse, otherworldly yet flesh and bone. A look of lightning flashed from somewhere in his soul. The force of that man's fist would be a thunderbolt. Yet he wore no helmet, and no hauberk either. No armored apparel or plate was apparent, and he swung no sword, nor sported any shield, but held in one hand a sprig of holly, of all the evergreens the greenest ever, and in the other hand held the mother of all axes, a cruel piece of kit, I kid you not. The head was an ell in length at least, and forged in green steel with a gilt finish. The skull-busting blade was so stropped and buffed it could shear a man's scalp and shave him to boot. The handle which fitted that fiend's great fist was inlaid with iron end to end, with green pigment picking out impressive designs. From stock to neck, where it stopped with a knot, a lace was looped the length of the haft, trimmed with tassels and tails of string, fastened firmly in place by forest green buttons. And he kicks on, canters through that crowded hall, towards the top table, not the least bit timid, cocksure of himself, sitting high in the saddle. "And who," he bellows, without breaking breath, "is the governor of this gaggle? I'll be glad to know. It's with him and him alone that I'll have my say." The green man steered his gaze deep into every eye, explored each person's face to probe for a reply. The guests looked on. They gaped and they gawked and were mute with amazement. What did it mean that human and horse could develop this hue, should grow to be grass green or greener still, like green enamel emboldened by bright gold? Some stood and stared, then stepped a little closer, drawn near to the knight to know his next move. They'd seen some sights, but this was something special. A miracle, or magic, so they imagined. Yet several of the lords were like statues in their seats, left speechless and rigid, not risking a response. The hall fell hushed, as if all who were present had slipped into sleep or some trance-like state. No doubt not all were stunned and stilled by dread, but duty-bound to hold their tongues until their sovereign could respond. Then the king acknowledged this curious occurrence, cordially addressed him, keeping his cool. "A warm welcome, sir, this winter's night. My name is Arthur. I am head of this house. Won't you slide from that saddle and stay a while, and the business which brings you we shall learn of later?" "No," said the knight. "It is not in my nature to idle or lack about this evening. But because your claim is so loudly chorused, and your castle and brotherhood are called the best, the strongest men to ever mount the saddle, the worthiest knights ever known to the world, both in competition and true combat, and, since courtesy, so it's said, is championed here, I'm intrigued and attracted to your door at this time. Be assured by this Holland stem here in my hand that I mean no menace. So expect no malice, for if I'd slogged here tonight to slay and slaughter, my helmet and hauberk wouldn't be at home, and my sword and spear would be here at my side, and more weapons of war, as I'm sure you're aware. I am clothed for peace, not kitted out for conflict. But if you're half as honorable as I've heard folk say, you'll gracefully grant me this game which I ask for by right." Then Arthur answered, "Knight most courteous, you claim a fair, unarmored fight. We'll see you have the same." "I'm spoiling for no scrap, I swear. Besides, the bodies on these benches are just bum-fluffed bairns. If I'd ridden to your castle rigged out for a ruck, these lightweight adolescents wouldn't last a minute. But it's Yuletide, a time of youthfulness, yes? So at Christmas in this court, I lay down a challenge. If a person here present, within these premises, is big or bold or red-blooded enough to strike me one stroke, and be struck in return, I shall give him as a gift this gigantic cleaver, and the axe shall be his to handle how he likes. I'll kneel, bare my neck, and take the first knock. So, who has the gall, the gumption, the guts? Who'll spring from his seat and snatch this weapon? I offer the axe. Who'll have it as his own? I'll afford one free hit, from which I won't flinch, and promise that 12 months will pass in peace. Then claim the duty I deserve in 1 year and a day." Does no one have the nerve to wager in this way? Flustered at first, now totally foxed, were the household and the lords, both the high-born and the low. Still stirruped, the knight swiveled round in his saddle, looking left and right, his red eyes rolling beneath the bristles of his bushy green brows, his beard swishing from side to side. When the court kept its counsel, he cleared his throat and stiffened his spine. Then he spoke his mind. "So, here is the house of Arthur," he scoffed, "whose virtues reverberate across vast realms. Where's the fortitude and fearlessness you are so famous for? and the breathtaking bravery of this big-mouth bragging. The towering reputation of the Round Table, skiddled and scuppered by a stranger. What a scandal! You flap and you flinch, and I've not raised a finger. Then he laughed so loud that their leader saw red. Blood flowed to his fine-featured face, and he raged inside. His men were also hurt. Those words had pricked their pride. But born so brave at heart, the king stepped up one stride. Your request, he countered, is quite insane, and folly finds the man who flirts with the fool. No warrior worth his salt would be worried by your words. So in heaven's good name, hand over the axe, and I'll happily fulfill the favor you ask. He strides to him swiftly and seizes his arm. The man-mountain dismounts in one mighty leap. Then Arthur grips the axe, grabs it by its haft, and takes it above him, intending to attack. Yet the stranger before him stands up straight, highest in the house by at least a head. Quite simply, he stands there, stroking his beard, fiddling with his coat, his face without fear, about to be bludgeoned, but no more bothered than a guest at the table being given a goblet of wine. By Guinevere, Gawain, now to his king, inclines, and says, I stake my claim. This moment must be mine. Should you call me, courteous lord, said Gawain to his king, to rise from my seat and stand at your side, politely take leave of my place at the table, and quit without causing offense to my queen, then I shall come to your counsel before this great court. For I find it unfitting, as my fellow knights would, when a deed of such daring is dangled before us, that you take on this trial, tempted as you are, when brave, bold men are seated on these benches, men never matched in the mettle of their minds, never beaten or bettered in the field of battle. I am weakest of your warriors and feeblest of wit. Loss of my life would be grieved the least. Were I not your nephew, my life would mean nothing. To be born of your blood is my body's only claim. Such a foolish affair is unfitting for a king. So, being first to come forward, it should fall to me. And if my proposal is improper, let no other person stand blame. The knighthood then unites, and each knight says the same. Their king can stand aside and give Gawain the game. So the sovereign instructed his knight to stand. Getting to his feet, he moved graciously forward and knelt before Arthur, taking hold of the axe. Letting go of it, Arthur then held up his hand to give young Gawain the blessing of God, and hope he finds firmness in heart and fist. Take care, young cousin, to catch him cleanly. Use full-blooded force, then you needn't fear the blow which he threatens to trade in return. Gawain, with the weapon, walked towards the warrior, and they stood face to face, not one man afraid. Then the Green Knight spoke, growled at Gawain. Before we compete, repeat what we've promised. And start by saying your name to me, sir, and tell me the truth, so I can take it on trust. In good faith, it's Gawain, said the God-fearing knight. I heave this axe, and whatever happens after, in 12 months' time I'll be struck in return, with any weapon you wish, and by you and you alone. The other answers, says, Well, by my living bones, I welcome you, Gawain, to bring the blade head home. Gawain, said the Green Knight, by God, I'm glad the favor I've called for will fall from your fist. You've perfectly repeated the promise we've made, and the terms of the contest are crystal clear. Except for one thing. You must solemnly swear that you'll seek me out yourself, that you'll search me out to the ends of the earth, to earn that same blow as you'll dole out today in this decorous hall." "But where will you be? Where's your abode? You're a man of mystery, as God is my maker. Which court do you come from, and what are you called? There is knowledge I need, including your name. Then by wit I'll work out the way to your door, and keep to our contract, so cross my heart." "But enough at New Year, it needs nothing more," said the war man in green to worthy Gawain. "I could tell you the truth once you've taken the blow. If you smite me smartly, I could spell out the facts of my house and home, and my name if it helps. Then you'll pay me a visit and vouch for our pact. Or, if I keep quiet, you might cope much better, loafing and lounging here, looking no further." "But you stall! Now, grasp that gruesome axe, and show me your striking style." He answered, "Since you ask," and touched the tempered steel. In the standing position, he prepared to be struck, bent forward, revealing a flash of green flesh, as he heaped his hair to the crown of his head, and the nape of his neck, now naked and ready. Gawain grips the axe, and heaves it heavenwards, plants his left foot firmly on the floor in front, then swings it swiftly towards the bare skin. The cleanness of the strike cleaved the spinal cord, and parted the fat and the flesh so far that the bright steel blade took a bite from the floor. The handsome head tumbles onto the earth, and the king's men kick it as it clatters past. Blood gutters brightly against his green gown, yet the man doesn't shudder, or stagger, or sink, but trudges toward them on those tree-trunk legs and rummages around, reaches at their feet, and cops hold of his head, and hoists it high, and strides to his steed, snatches the bridle, steps into the stirrup, and swings into the saddle, still gripping his head by a handful of hair. Then he settles himself in the seat with ease of a man unmarked, never mind being minus his head. And when he wheeled about, his bloody neck still bled. His point was proved. The court was deadened now with dread. For that scalp and skull now swung from his fist. Towards the top table he turned the face, and it opened its eyelids, stared straight ahead, and spoke this speech, which you'll hear for yourselves. "Sir Gawain, be wise enough now to keep your word, and faithfully follow me until I'm found, as you vowed in this hall within hearing of these horsemen. You're charged with getting to the Green Chapel, to reap what you've sown. You'll rightfully receive the justice you are due just as January dawns. Men know my name as the Green Chapel Knight, and even a fool couldn't fail to find me. So come, or be called a coward forever." With a tug of the reins, he twisted around, and, head still in hand, galloped out of the hall, so the hooves brought fire from the flame in the flint. Which kingdom he came from they hadn't a clue, no more than they knew where he made for next. And then, well, with the green man gone, they laughed and grinned again. And yet such goings-on were magic to those men. And although King Arthur was awestruck at heart, no sign of it showed. Instead, he spoke to his Queen of Queens with courteous words. "Dear lady, don't be daunted by this deed today. It's in keeping that such strangeness should occur at Christmas between sessions of banter and seasonal song, amid the lively pastimes of ladies and lords. And, at least, I'm allowed to eat, at last, having witnessed such wonder, wouldn't you say?" Then he glanced at Gawain, and was graceful with his words. "Now, hang up your axe. One hack is enough." So it dangled from the drape behind the day, so that men who saw it would be mesmerized and amazed, and give voice on its evidence to that stunning event. Then the two of them turned and walked to the table, the monarch and his man, and were met with food. Double dishes apiece, rare delicacies, all manner of meals, and the music of minstrels. And they danced and sang till the sun went down that day. But mind your mood, Gawain. Keep blacker thoughts at bay, or lose this lethal game you've promised you will play.